Welcome back, guys. Today we're going to be using this Hornady custom grade 9mm die set here. As full disclosure, Hornady did send me this die set and several other die sets for testing and evaluation. However, my caveat to them was that I give a fair and honest review of the product that I've received. You'll see in this video that there are some positives to this die set, and there are a couple things that I don't like as well. So I do my best to give you an honest perspective on what I think. One of the first things you notice when you pick up a Hornady custom grade sizing die is the somewhat yellowish orange insert that is the titanium nitride portion of the sizing die. By contrast, most other manufacturers use some sort of tungsten carbide, which is a dark gray, with the exception of Redding that uses titanium carbide. To start off this test, I'm going to be simply sizing a couple cases with both my Lee die, which is well worn in, as well as the brand new Hornady sizing die. But first things first, let's get it threaded into our press. With the Hornady style of lock rings that have the nice flats on the sides, I do like to use a wrench just to snug it down. Don't crank down on this, just enough to keep it from backing loose. Now, since this die is brand new, I'm going to use a little bit of Imperial sizing die wax here on the first couple cases. This just helps to get things smoothed in. And while Hornady says that you can use this without any kind of lubricant, I have noticed that the amount of force required to size the brass is at the very least cut in half, if not cut in thirds or even fourths, by using lube as compared to just sticking the cases in by themselves. Personal preference, you can run it both ways. I have run it both ways with no issues. What you want to do, up to you on this one. I prefer to run a little bit of case lube. If I'm doing these in bulk, I do prefer to use liquid lanolin and isoheat mix, although for a couple like this, the Imperial sizing die wax works great. As you can see here, we have good consistent sizing on that case. Once the camera focuses, no chatter marks, no scratch marks, and primer is properly knocked out. Looking good. I then repeated that same process on an additional case, just to give us a sample size of 2 for our measurements. One of the unique features of the Hornady as compared to the Lee is the setup they use for the actual decapping and expandable mandrel stem. The stem itself is threaded, which allows for fine adjustments in the vertical orientation, but it also includes a fingered wedge nut to hold it in place. Of course, the Hornadys, like I said, we have that titanium nitride sizing ring. Now it's time to switch over to Lee, size a couple cases with that, and then we can measure them. One thing that I forgot to mention during the setup with the Hornady dies is that they are both threaded down to touch the shell holder when it's in the max vertical position, so you get complete sizing on the case while not stressing the sizing inserts in either of the dies. Measuring our size diameter, first with the Hornady, let's see what we have here. These calipers were properly zeroed. We're looking at 0.3725 inches and consistent on the round. With the second one, 0.3720. Again, that last half thousandths could be a variance in the calipers. I'm not willing to trust it down to that last half thousandths. Now for the one sized by the Lee. What do we have? 0.3725. 0.15 there. Okay, let's check the other one. 720, 715. I did notice when I was feeling these, there is a slight bit of out of roundness, although I'd probably only put it at thousandths, maybe thousandths and a half. 0.3455 on the inside. .350. 3445 for the Hornadys. 349. And you can see there we are properly zeroed. Shut my calipers off so I don't drain the battery. For this next part, we're going to be setting up the next stage in the reloading procedure, the expanding die. The Hornady is unique as compared to, in this case, the Lyman or the Redding that I have, in that the only adjustment you can do is done by the die body itself. So you don't have to worry about the expander plug working its way loose or the jam nut on the top of the die backing out, something like that. It's literally the entire die is your main fixed adjustment. You can see here on this Lyman that you have the jam nut on the top to lock down the plug insert and then the die body itself. I've used this die for several years now, and it's been my go-to for 9mm expansion. It's the M die profile. Let's compare it to this Hornady die, see how it does. I'm first going to start off with my Lyman M die, threading that down into the press, and getting a expansion baseline with that, as that is the one that I have already preset up. You can see here, the projectile sits into the end of the case relatively easy and stays there, even if I turn it over upside down, and sits relatively straight. Now, let's set up the Hornady expander. For the first thing, we're going to make sure our lock ring is almost all the way to the top of the die. Like I said earlier, you can note the inside of this is a single piece expanding plug with a standard flat top. Begin by threading it into the press. I get started here. And this next part is basically trial and error. With a properly sized case in the ram, I simply lower the die until I feel contact, and then we can begin the trial and error process of getting the sizing correct. For this first one, I'm going to check it here. Notice that projectile is not going to seat in that case. We're going to need to lower the die a little bit further. Go about a quarter turn at a time, run in the die, and recheck it. Closer, but still not quite. Another quarter turn. And the goal here is you want the projectile to sit squarely and easily inside the case without overworking the brass too much. And you can see there, that goes in relatively easily. Stays squared off and doesn't fall out if I tip this case upside down. Gonna try going maybe 8th turn here or so, just a little bit more, see how that does it. You will have some overall length variance in these cases. It's minimal, but it's there. I try to shoot for the minimum denominator and make sure that it's going to expand them all reliably. Some might be overexpanded by thousandths or so. That's okay. With our die positioned exactly where we want it, I simply take the hex key, stick it into the set screw here on the die, and we need to tighten down that lock ring. Now with this style of lock ring, whether it be a Hornady like this, a Redding, a Lyman, if you snug the set screw down with the die in the base position, the lock ring will simply cam itself against the surface of the press, and when you go to remove it, will not retain your setting. A trick I've learned for this is simply crack the lock ring loose, back the die out a little bit, and then tighten it down fully, making sure to note what position on the die body the lock ring is oriented towards, and then you should be good. Obviously confirm this, but it's what's worked for me. In using this expander die, I have noticed maybe a 1/3 reduction in the amount of force it takes to properly expand a case as compared to my Lyman M die, which has long been a favorite of mine. That, coupled with the fact that you don't have to worry about a secondary expanding stem coming loose or about the die being significantly tall. This is a fairly short die. Make it a win in my book. We'll keep testing it, of course, but it's definitely looking good so far. I like this die, and I think I'll be pulling it out more often whenever I'm loading 9mm. Next, I'm going to get these cases charged with powder after they're all expanded, and we're going to highlight the seating die. I'll be honest, out of all the dies in this set, this seating die is the one that I've been looking forward to testing the most. Unlike traditional sizing dies, this one has 2 adjustments on top. One to actually adjust the crimp without adjusting the die height. As you can see here, you have a seating stem on the very top, and then the next stem that threads into is your crimping adjustment screw. Obviously there's jam nuts and rubber O-rings in between just to keep everything locked down. This also includes a floating alignment sleeve, as you can see on the bottom, which helps keep everything concentric when you are seating. Here's the instructions. You can pause that if you want to look over those in more detail. And of course, they do include an exploded parts view, should you want to disassemble this die for cleaning, or in some reason you need replacement parts. So overall, what do I think of this new Hornady 9mm custom grade die set? Well, as far as the sizing die goes, it gives a perfect concentric sizing of the cases themselves. And I really like the feature of the zip spindle on the top, allowing for either coarse or fine adjustments of the decapping stem, or on a bottleneck cartridge would also be your expander manual. While I can't yet speak to long-term durability, I will say that the sizing force required to fully size pieces of brass with this particular die is slightly more than both my Lee and substantially more than my Redding titanium carbide sizing dies. For that reason, and though it's a good die, I still do prefer my Reddings in this case. Now, in terms of the expander die as well as the seat crimp die, those both impressed me significantly. For the expander die, it requires significantly less force than the Lyman M die that I have been using for several years to expand my cases. That, coupled with the fact that it really can't lose its adjustment once you have the lock ring set down against the top of the press, makes this great for either leaving permanently in a tool head on a progressive press, or in any instance where you're going to be using this die on maybe a smaller framed press or something with a little bit less leverage. In terms of the seating and crimping die, I really appreciated the ability to dial in both seating and crimping settings without having to loosen the lock ring and move the die body, which is definitely a nice touch. That, coupled with the fact that the floating alignment sleeve on the bottom ensures that you're not going to be pinching your hands, raising those bullets up into the seating die, is just an added win, in my opinion. I'm very pleased with this die, and will continue to use it as probably my main 9mm seating die from here on out. All in all, I am very pleased with this die set and think it would make a valuable addition to any reloader's bench. From a top level view, a couple nice things that I am thankful for in this set. They do include a separate seating stem. You can see here next to the seating die. That is for semi-wad cutter profile bullets, so you're not cutting a groove into them or mushing down the noses when you're trying to seat them. They also include 2 spare decapping pins. Those are relatively easy to change out. Some manufacturers do, some don't. I'm glad they do. Good on you, Hornady, for that forethought there. My biggest criticism of this die set, and likewise with many other die sets on the market, you can see right here that little post in the center is for a shell holder, and it does not include a shell holder. Now, I know Redding does the same thing. They do not include a shell holder with their sets, and believe it or not, Lee is one of the few that actually does, even though they're one of the budget brands. So I would like to see a shell holder come with these sets as standard. Again, it's kind of industry standard that they don't, but I wish they did. Aside from that, great set. It's doing well for me so far. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section down below. If you have any questions or I want to see any other specific dies on the channel here in the future, let me know. I will probably be testing the 30-06 set as well as the 38-57 set here in the next upcoming weeks. As always, thanks for watching the channel. Let me know what you think, and keep on reloading.